Okay, ladies, I hope you're enjoying your salad, and there is plenty more, so you can go back and get seconds when you're ready. But also, I want to tell you, we have a special summer dessert. We have strawberry shortcake, and it's at the back table. There's little shortcakes. You can dish up your berries. There's real whipped topping. There's Greek yogurt for those of you who are sensitive to dairy. And so I would just love it if, like, when you're just naturally finished with your salads at any time during the rest of the evening, you can just get up and mosey on over and get your dessert and come back. We won't have a, like, everybody go get dessert moment. We'll just do it as you, but please do get dessert because we have like over 200 desserts that need to be eaten tonight. So please do. But while you're finishing eating, I just want to share with you about what are some ways that you can enter into our women's community. And I want to tell you about our women's Bible study. That's probably, I would say, the heartbeat of women's ministry for us. Is our Bible study is called The River. And we love to study God's Word, and we love to go deep in the study of God's Word. And this is actually our 15th year together studying the Bible. It's just been an amazing journey. The way that the River works is we have a workbook that when you sign up, you get this workbook that is the entire year's worth of lessons. We come together in the sanctuary. We have a time of worship. You hear live teaching from a teaching team. You then break into small groups. You have a small group leader, and you're in a small group for the entire year. You have a great dynamic discussion around that lesson, and then you have some time of prayer together. And so that's what we do every week from September through May. This year, we are over the moon, I should say, honestly, about our newest study. We're doing a study on the book of Exodus, and I know some people go, oh, Exodus, the Old Testament, blah. But let me tell you, I am crazy about this new study. It's called Discovering God's Glory Through Exodus. We have a team of women who've spent 2 years writing this study. And this study has surprised us in how special it's become, because every single lesson is focusing on an attribute of God, and it looks at how what happened on the ground in that lesson foreshadows an aspect of the coming of the Messiah, of Christ. And what I think really took us back when we got done writing this lesson, at least for me, is that when you think about it, the reason that God called his people out of slavery was to reveal himself to them, right? Which he did through revealing his attributes. He became their God and they became his people. So it's a very personal relationship of him letting himself be known to this collection of human beings that he called. And also the kinds of things and patterns that he set up and the journey that he took them on. All of that also foreshadowed what would happen when Christ came down the road as their Messiah. And so it is really one of the most special studies I've ever encountered and experienced writing. So my heart for you is like, please come join us. You can come live on Tuesday mornings, live on Tuesday evenings. You can come Thursday morning to a modified discussion group experience here at the church. We have independent study groups. We have virtual groups. So we have women from all over the country who zoom in on virtual groups, either in the morning or the evening. We have a group of women in Canada who are doing the study with us. So last year we had close to 700 women who are participating in the study, and we just would love for you to join us. So also within the River, we have what's called our Young Moms groups. And our Young Moms groups are really women who are in the season of raising young children. We have a full preschool program called The Creek, which when I introduced Holly to you, she's one of our Creek coordinators. Taylor is our other one, and she's downstairs tonight with the children. Together, they also have led a team of curriculum writers for the Creek. So this year, the Creek team has written a children's preschool program that mirrors what the moms are studying. So the kids are going to learn the same attributes of God that we're learning, and they're going to learn the same aspects of the coming Christ that we're learning. So it's an amazing program. So Creek is for infants through 5. And we will probably have 100 children in that program and a phenomenal team of leaders. So, and I just want to say, our young moms groups, we will have 4 young moms group this year. We'll probably have 80 young moms in this program. So the young moms groups are just a part of the experience inside the river. But it's a really special way for relationships to be nurtured for women who are in a season that can be very lonely sometimes, and they can build some deep friendships. So Chandra's going to tell you about some other ways that you can get involved.
Yeah, besides the river, we have a group of women that meet. They are 60 years and older, and they are the saints of our church. It is our Oaks group, and you can find out information about them. They'll be starting to meet again in the fall, so we invite you all, if you are in that age category, to join them and get connected. There's Ginny right there, who's looking at her picture. I'm enjoying this moment here, seeing like the two of you, Carol and Ginny, are up on the screen. And then we have another group that's started by Karen Herman, and that's Hope Gathering. This is for widows. It's a special ministry so that you can come along, be together. We have 2 different groups, one that meets here in Lake Oswego, here at the church, and one that just started this summer in Wilsonville. And so it's a wonderful community for that phase of life as well. Now, there are other ways you can get involved. If you love to serve, we have service teams. We have all kinds of different opportunities for you to join us in decor, like you're seeing the beauty that is on display even today, kitchen, greeting, hospitality, all kinds of things. We would love for you to join us. We consider you guys ministry partners. We're doing ministry together so that we can bring Jesus and community to all the women that we encounter. And so we would love for you to join us in any way you'd like to in that way. You can find out all about these other opportunities on our website. So we have riverwest.org, and if you just do /women, you'll find Oaks, you'll find Hope Gathering, you'll find service, you'll find the river registration, creek, all the things. And so please join us there, either on the website or the app. So now I get to have the pleasure of introducing our speaker. So Niki Strealy is our speaker tonight. She is a beloved member of our River West community and a river leader. And she is a registered dietitian and nutritionist specializing in digestive health. So the digestive system has always fascinated her. Now, I don't know if all of you feel that same way, but it has always fascinated her, and she lovingly remembers coloring digestive diagrams in her elective class of anatomy in high school. So there's something unique. I don't know if we've all done that. She graduated with her bachelor's of science in nutrition and food management, and then she completed her internship at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. In her internship, she realized that no one taught her how to educate patients on what to eat for their gastrointestinal problems. And that surprised her, that everyone eats, and it just makes sense that the food you eat must go through the digestive system first before it enters the rest of the body. So why aren't we talking about these things, was her question. So it became her passion to learn how to teach people how to eat when their gut doesn't seem to work like everyone else's. In 2012, she started her own private practice called Strategic Nutrition. And then in 2013, she self-published her first book, The Diarrhea Dietitian: Expert Advice, Practical Solutions, and Strategic Nutrition. So her clients now benefit from her 3-tiered approach: education, her professionalism, and also her personal experience. So she's also known as the Diarrhea Dietitian on Facebook. And one of her goals in life is to convince the world that it's okay to talk about bowels, diarrhea, and gas. Okay, guys, are you ready for a fun night? I know, this is great, right? According to Niki, it was best said in the children's book, everyone poops. And let's face it, everyone does. And if yours aren't normal, you've come to the right place and you will feel welcome here. She loves empowering people to improve their digestive health and their quality of life through the power of food. So tonight, she'll be sharing with us on a woman's guide to digestive health at every age, offering practical and encouraging wisdom to us about caring for our bodies through the changing seasons of a woman's life. Please welcome Niki Strealy.
Want to tell people about them? Cards.
That was in my notes and I missed it. Okay. We do have some cards on your table, and these say questions for Niki. We are going to have a short period of time after Niki's done with her presentation to be able to ask her some questions. So if you, along the way as she's speaking, you think of something, please write it down, and we'll come around and collect it at the end after she's done speaking, and we'll be able to have her address a few of the questions that you have. So please do get these close by and have them ready.
Thank you, Chandra, and thank you, Marianne, for letting me talk about one of my favorite things in the whole wide world. I have loved Jesus my whole life, and I've loved digestion since probably high school, and for me, it's like a dream to be able to put them together tonight, so thank you for this opportunity. If you're someone with kind of a squeamish stomach and you don't like the fact that I'm going to be talking about poop, you might want to just finish your salad here. I try to make that toward the end of the presentation, so you should be good about the first half. But if you're someone that doesn't want to hear about poop while you're consuming your snacks, and your dessert, you may just want to be one of the first people at the dessert table. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. I did not write that bio, by the way. Some of that is from my website, but it's all true. I really love talking about digestion, and I have for a really long time. These are some things, some fun facts about me. In a couple of weeks, 2 weeks, it'll be 30 years since I've been a registered dietitian. So it feels like I've been doing this forever, and it really has been. It's been a long time. So I'm going to start with a little story. I think that sometimes when we come to church, the pastor likes to start with a story, so I'm going to start with one too. So this is a little bit about my story. And when I meet someone for the first time, one of my patients comes to me, I tell them my story, partly because I think it helps them to feel more comfortable sharing their story as well. We all have a story. And part of the reason that I care about other people's digestion is because mine hasn't been working right really most of my life. So it makes me a lot more passionate about helping people. So this picture on the left is me, my little 7th grade self. You can tell I was really a fashionista. You can also tell I did not have curly hair until I was 20, so I had kind of straight hair, which is those are actually curled, in the 80s, we curled our bangs. Yeah, those are curled. Okay, so, I always had diarrhea when I was younger, and in my 7th grade sports physical, the pediatrician decided to send me to the gastroenterologist. So that really began my whole journey, and I had a lot of tests done because my aunt had ulcerative colitis, and they came back and they said, good news, you don't have ulcerative colitis, you don't have Crohn's disease. At that time, they were like, those are the really bad things. They said, we think you have irritable bowel syndrome. Here's a 1-page flyer on what is IBS. We don't have a treatment for you, or we never even need to see you again. There's no follow-up. Goodbye. And I was like, okay, thanks. And, I was like 12 or 13, and I didn't know what to do for myself, but I began this journey of what can I do to help myself? So I changed my diet. Of course, we didn't have the internet back then, so I was talking to people. I was looking stuff up in the card catalog at the library. Remember that? And so it really just began my interest in health and awareness and nutrition. So I went through high school. I had the tests all repeated about when I was 17, so the problems didn't go away. I ended up going to college, eventually getting my degree in nutrition. The picture on the right is the first Christmas I worked, because when you first get a job, you have to work all the holidays, and so I had to work on Christmas. And my grandparents came to visit me at St. V's, that's me at St. Vincent, working on Christmas, and so they felt bad for me, so my grandparents came and visited me. So I started my career in the hospital, working in ICU and working on the surgical floor. So I was helping people that had their digestive tract operated on, but when they got done with their surgery, I would come in and say, this is how your diet is going to need to be a little different. This is how your bowel movements are going to change. So I was talking about poop even way back then. And I love doing that, but if you've ever been in the hospital or spent time with someone, it's not the best time to learn new information. So I was so disappointed when people wouldn't remember this really great diet instruction I would give. And so I worked in the hospital for 6 years, and I moved to an outpatient role, and I worked for Providence as an outpatient dietitian for about 10 years. Then I opened my own private practice in 2012. So I've pretty much been just working for myself ever since then, but really always focused on digestive health and wellness. So when I talk to my patients, I always tell them, like, I've been in your shoes. Like, I understand what it's like to have doctors say, we don't really know what to do for you. Fast forward, but also rewind a little bit. About 10 years ago, I had some symptoms, and I was like, oh, I think I know what this is. And I got some more testing and found out I have celiac disease. So that's really fun, too. So now I have to be gluten-free wherever I go. Just gave me a whole nother layer to be able to discuss with my patients. So when people have digestive problems, they have foods that they cannot eat. I get that. I have to do that every day. Yep, I was like one of the first people in the line, and yes, it was because I was speaking tonight, but also when you have celiac disease, you have to be careful that there's no cross-contact with your food, so you have to really be careful with that. So I have a lot of passion about helping people navigate what that looks like in their regular life. So enough about me. Let's keep talking. Okay, so this is our outline for today. When I'm in the audience, I kind of want to know, what's the roadmap? What are we going to do? What are we going to talk about? And how will I know when we're almost done? So here we go. We're going to talk about the gut microbiome, one of my favorite things, digestion through the decades, tips to improve your digestive health, and then tips for common digestive issues. And then at the end, that's going to be the time where there's going to be a summary and a Q&A. So there's going to be some practical tips. Those are going to be more toward the end, so you might just want to hang in there if you're like, I don't know what I'm going to need, but the practical stuff will be more toward the end. Okay, so just because I want to understand my audience here, I want people to raise their hands if they have had any one of the symptoms that are listed here, or if you are uncomfortable raising a hand for yourself. If you know someone, you're related to somebody, you're married to someone, or you have someone living in your household that's had one of these problems, raise your hand. Yeah, I think most of us, right, have experienced that. So the good news is that I'm here to tell you today that you don't have to just live with it. So that is something that I feel like as women, and I'm going through perimenopause, I'll talk about that just a little bit in a little while, but we've been just kind of taught this is just something you have to just deal with, right? And I feel like that's been frustrating. I feel like digestive health is similar, where people are suffering. People are afraid to leave their homes. They can't come to church. They don't want to do activities with their friends. They feel really isolated. And it doesn't have to be that way. So I'm just here to tell you that we can work through it. It doesn't have to be with me, but there's somebody out there that can help you get back to your life. Okay, buckle up. Here we go. Okay, so we're going to start with the gut microbiome. So one of the reasons I enjoy talking with people about their digestive health problems is because it touches so many different areas of the body. So it affects your nutrient absorption, your immune function, your bone health, your energy levels, your mood and your mental health, sexual intimacy. You're like, what? How? Well, if you've ever had a lot of bloating, a lot of gas or diarrhea, let me tell you, it will definitely affect or impact your sexual intimacy. So that is something that is absolutely true. And then overall, your quality of life. So like I mentioned a second ago, people really are trapped sometimes in their bodies and in their homes. And so this is a way that we know that the digestive system impacts all of that. So let's start with the basics. We're going to talk about some science stuff first, but if you're like someone that doesn't like the science, just hang in there. There'll be some practical stuff later, so there's going to be a little bit of something for everybody today. So what is the gut microbiome? So I love talking about this. So the gut microbiome is the collection of microorganisms that can influence the human body during both homeostasis and disease. Why is it important? Well, the gut microbiome helps you digest food, makes important nutrients, trains your immune system, protects you from harmful germs, and supports brain function through something called the gut-brain microbiome axis. Try to say that 3 times fast. We're going to talk about that in just a second. So what is the gut microbiome? What does it consist of? So yes, it's definitely bacteria, but there are 40 trillion microbes. And not only is it bacteria, it's fungi, archaea, viruses, and protozoa. And the highest concentration is actually in your large intestine. But I bet you didn't know that you have a microbiome in your ear, in your nose, in your vagina, in your belly button. So we've got a lot of different microbiomes, but the one we're really focused on is the one in your gut. And fun fact, 99% of the genes in your body are actually coming from the microbes. So only 1% are your own genetic material. So we are made mostly of bugs, which is kind of crazy to think about. So the gut microbiome was largely a mystery, and they decided they had the Human Microbiome Project in about 2000, and they started studying it, and they thought, oh, we're going to figure this out in just a couple of years. They said, we're going to figure out what bugs are living in the intestines, and we're gonna figure out which ones are the good ones and which ones are the bad ones, and then we'll know what to do about it. Well, that was like 25 years ago, and we still have a lot of research, but we still have a long ways to go. So the current research is actually focused on not just the bugs, but what are they doing? So what we learned is that these microbes produce these little chemical compounds, they're called metabolites. So now we're looking at what's called the metabolome, which is what are these bugs doing and why is that important? So for example, we've learned that instead of thinking about your gut microbes as being good or bad, we're saying, what are they doing? And what we found is that in these communities of microbes living in your gut, one bug might function as a teacher in this person's gut, it might be a lawyer in this person's gut, and it might be a plumber in somebody else's gut. So it's really changed how we view what's going on in the gut, because it's no longer who's good, who's bad, it's what are they doing. So then we want to find out, once we know what they're doing, we want to know what are the therapies, what are the treatments, what are the ways that we can improve that when somebody has a gut microbiome that is unbalanced. So I went to, or every year I go to this Digestive Disease Week, and this year I attended, and it was in Chicago, and I went to this fascinating lecture where all of the world's best gut microbiome specialists were doing kind of a roundtable discussion. And I was just feverishly taking notes, and one of the big aha moments is when they say, and these are people that are doing all the research, they're like, we don't even know what a normal gut microbiome is. Let me say that again. Right now, in 2026, we don't even know what good or normal is. So you could have someone with a good or healthy microbiome, and they still might have disease. They might have cancer. They might have, something else going on in their body metabolically. Or vice versa. You might have someone with a sick microbiome, but the rest of their body seems quite healthy. So until we can really establish what a healthy gut microbiome looks like, it's really hard to prescribe therapies for it. So that's something that's really important to keep in mind as we're discussing, gut therapies today, is we still don't even know what good or normal looks like. But apparently, the diversity is one of the most important things that we have. So we want to have a lot of different bugs doing a lot of different things, but we don't yet know what that's supposed to look like. So that's the really overarching thing that I want to say before we get too deep into this, is that we're still learning a lot, or the scientists are still. So now, I mentioned just a minute ago the gut-brain microbiome axis. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So what is that? It's kind of a mouthful. So it's a bidirectional network. So that means it works both directions, linking the central, enteric, and autonomic systems through communication pathways. So what this means is that the gut and the brain are talking to each other all the time. And sometimes that conversation isn't what it needs to be, and that conversation alone can impact people's ability to digest their food, the sensations they feel in their body, whether they feel really bloated or really gassy or have a lot of pain after they eat. This can come from this miscommunication between the gut and the brain. So some of the newest treatments are really focusing on how can we make our gut and our brain play nicely together. So a little bit more about the gut-brain microbiome axis. What do we have the ability to change? So in this diagram, it's a little bit busy. This is actually taken from a scientific study, so I didn't make this up. But you'll see on the left-hand side, we have dysbiosis, which is basically just an imbalanced gut microbiome. And that can be from poor diet, unhealthy lifestyle, stress, use of antibiotics, and chronic infections. So on the right-hand side, in the green bubble, those are the things that we really have the ability to maybe take or change in order to improve our gut microbiome axis. So that's prebiotics, which we'll talk about, probiotics, which we'll talk about, healthy diet, which we'll talk about, and healthy lifestyle. So those are some things that we're going to cover a little bit later. And then just one more thing is that actually our gut-brain microbiome axis is not just one pathway. We're going to talk about one pathway on the next slide. But this is really looking at all these 6. So that little paragraph between the gut and the brain, there are 6 different systems that communicate our gut and our brain. So it's not just one. So now we're going to talk about the vagus nerve. I'm just kind of curious. How many people have heard of the vagus nerve? You raise your hands? Yeah, a lot of people. Okay, so there's a lot of really cool research around the vagus nerve. It's one of the most important ways that our gut and our brain communicate. The vagus nerve is actually the longest nerve in the body, and it physically connects the digestive tract to the brain. So in this diagram, on the left-hand side, we have the parasympathetic system, and on the right, we have the sympathetic nervous system. I don't expect you to remember all of this, but just know that our body normally floats between these two pretty simply. So on the right, the sympathetic nervous system is what we call our fight or flight system. Parasympathetic is what we call our rest and digest. So if someone is constantly in fight or flight, meaning they're under stress, they have a history of trauma, they're living in maybe an unsafe living environment, or something else is going on, they have unstable relationships, whatever, that degree of stress means that their body isn't going to digest their food as well. Because if you remember learning about fight or flight maybe way back in science class, if you were in a really fight or flight, like high, scary situation, and I always kind of joke, but let's say you were like in a big city and you had $10,000 in your pocket in cash, and you were walking through the streets and someone jumped out and they had a gun in their hand. That's fight or flight, right? You just feel like all of a sudden, all of your blood flows away from your stomach and your digestive tract. It flows into your arms and legs. And you're like, I'm about ready to run. At that moment, imagine eating a cheeseburger and fries. How hard would that be to digest your food, right? It would, if you could get it down, it would probably sit there in a big lump. So that's kind of like a joking example, but the reality is that that's what it's like for people who are living under stress all the time, is that their body is just not able to digest their food properly. So again, one of our goals in working on gut-brain microbiome axis is to make our body float between rest and digest and fight or flight pretty smoothly. Now, one of the things I think was really interesting is that there's specific bacterial strains that they use the vagus nerve to alter behavior. So cool, but also really creepy. So there are bugs that are living in your gut that, let's say they function on sugar. So they're like, I need sugar to live. So what they can do is they can send a little signal via the vagus nerve to your brain. Your brain's like, oh man, you know what sounds really good right now? Sugar. And so you eat the sugar and it feeds the bugs, and the big bugs are like, yay, we win. And so sometimes when I have those cravings, I'm like, do I really need the sugar or is it the bugs? So just be thinking about that, right? I don't know. It might just be the bugs, because it definitely could be. And I think one of the things that just amazes me about this is that God made this whole system, like in creation, thousands of years ago. And here we are, 2026, and the best doctors in the world are like, we just don't even really know how this works. And I'm like, because God does, doesn't he? And I just think that's so amazing that we still don't really know anything. As it turns out, we're learning, but we still don't know that much. Okay, so when you saw digestion through the decades, you're like, oh, cool, that's the part I'm coming here for. So we're going to talk about digestion through the decades. There may be some things that you're like, oh, I'm way past that. I don't need to know about that. There'll be some other areas that you're like, ooh, I wish you would have slowed down during that part, because guess what? I'm a fast talker. I usually warn people at the beginning. I also listen to my podcasts on 1.3 speed. I don't know if you're like that too. So I have to slow myself down because I also talk at 1.3 speed. So we'll try to slow down through this part. Okay. So let's talk about the microbiome in early life. So at birth, the human gut is actually virtually sterile. There are a number of influences in early life that impact the gut microbiome development, including maternal factors. So whether that baby was born vaginally or C-section, if that baby was breastfed or formula fed, various childhood exposures, so I had one of my kids had lots of ear infections and had lots of antibiotics, so that can definitely change things. And interestingly, the microbiome of a child looks like an adult by the time the child is about 2 to 3 years of age. Isn't that crazy? So by 2 or 3, it already looks a lot like what an adult microbiome is going to look like. Okay, so these are the factors that influence our digestive tract as we move through life. So diet, we're definitely going to talk about diet today, and that's whether you're having a more processed diet, more unprocessed foods, that variety of plants that you're consuming, your lifestyle, how much you sleep, how much stress you're under, what your environmental exposures are, how much you travel, our stress, so we talked about that a little bit in the gut-brain microbiome axis, what medications you're taking, what are your genetics? We can't change that. So we have these genes that we're born with, and that can have a really big impact on our digestive tract. Medical and surgical history. So people are like, what is that about? So if someone has had a lot of digestive surgeries, like if they've had a hysterectomy and then they had an appendectomy when they were younger and they had their gallbladder out, there can be a lot of scar tissue in the stomach. And if you think about scar tissue as kind of like sticky glue in there, and you can imagine that your food may not move through your digestive tract as well if you've got a lot of scar tissue in there. So that can impact digestion. And then I mentioned use of antibiotics. Okay, so now we're going to kind of talk about a few of these age points and unique challenges. So during those teen years, it's a really intense period of growth and development. We know that it's the onset of puberty. We know our kids have busy schedules. They're doing sports, they're doing activities, and so that means that their eating and their sleep schedules are kind of wacky. There's a higher rate of disordered eating and eating disorders during that age period. And again, those variable sleep patterns. Like my youngest is 19, and she's still like, sleeps at the weirdest times. So sometimes she works at 10 o'clock in the morning and she's up at 9, and then today she didn't work till 3, and at 12:15 she came and rubbing her eyes, and I was like, oh my goodness, I've been up for like 8 hours already. Like, what are they doing? So what do we want to focus on in terms of the gut microbiome for our teenagers? So we want to build that microbial diversity. We want to build some healthy eating patterns as much as we can. Make sure they're getting regular physical activity, manage stress. The better we can manage stress when we're younger, that's going to carry into adulthood. And again, regulating that sleep schedule, at least as best as you can. So in early adulthood, again, more busy schedules, skipping meals. So that happens a lot of times. If you're a young mom and you got to you got to take them to the doctor, or your, kid is, at school and you have to go work in the library or whatever. Those things are making it so it's harder for us to eat our regular schedule. We definitely have those stress-related symptoms. And can we just talk about the pregnancy-related gastrointestinal concerns, the GERD, the reflux, the hemorrhoids, all those things. So when we're focusing on digestion, when we're talking about early adulthood, we're building those healthy eating patterns just like we were doing with our teenagers. We're trying to get a wide variety of food and establishing regular eating schedules as much as we can, and then also making sure that stress management is something that we focus on. And we're going to get to some things that apply to everybody. These are just some kind of specific things for specific time periods. In midlife, this is where I am right now, we're managing our hormone fluctuations, weight changes, new diagnoses, and digestive symptoms that might come along with that. Changes in food tolerance. I can't tell you how many people are like, I've been eating these foods for all these years, and all of a sudden I can't do dairy anymore, or I have trouble with wheat, or I have to, fill in the blank. It happens a lot. And also with that sandwich generation, we know that if they're caring for their aging parents, they're still caring for their growing children. Sometimes, again, the eating is just off. You're just missing meals, or you're eating at a restaurant, or getting drive-through because, that's the best you can do right now. And I get that. So what are we going to focus on? So as we're moving into this midlife, we want to focus on maintaining muscle mass. So we want to do some weight training. Some of my folks, I'm having them add creatine. So I put question mark because that's not for everybody, but it's something that I'm talking more and more about. We want to make sure we get adequate protein to make sure we are building that healthy lean body mass that's going to last us into our older years. And we want to, if possible, increase our plant and our fiber intake. So that's our midlife. Now, we're moving into those wonderful golden years. And if you aren't there yet, what you have to look forward to, and those of you who are in that stage already are like, oh yeah, you just wait. Slower bowel motility. We're going to talk about constipation in a little while. Medication side effects, appetite changes. Interestingly, we have a reduced thirst sensation. So it's really common for people that are older to have trouble with being extra dehydrated because they just don't even know they're thirsty because that mechanism isn't working quite as well. And that sometimes if you have a loss of a spouse, that might change your living situation. So if you were used to being in a home where you made meals all the time, and now maybe you are living, either with your kids or you're living in a, retirement living or whatever, and they're making food for you, it's gonna change the foods that you eat because you've been eating the same way your whole life, and now someone is making food for you, and it's gonna look a little bit different. So what do we focus on in terms of our golden years? We want to make sure they're getting that adequate protein. So that's something that I'm not trying to go crazy on protein, but it is the one thing that I find that my ladies struggle a little bit more with is getting adequate protein. Here's a little hint, especially at breakfast. So breakfast is really the meal that I find that people are eating a lot of carbs and not eating as much protein. So we want to front load that protein first thing in the day. And this is not so much about the gut microbiome, but this is just about overall health. And we find that that really helps stabilize the blood sugar for the rest of the day. Here's an interesting hint. It helps you avoid carb cravings later in the day. So getting that protein first thing helps with carb cravings. We don't understand the mechanism. It's just one of those weird things. So we also want to focus on hydration, preventing constipation, which we'll talk about in a little while, and just overall maintaining nutritional status. So people that have good nutrition, when they get sick, like if they get sick in the winter, they get COVID, they get pneumonia, they get something, they rebound more quickly if they had a good nutritional status, before they got sick. So we want to make sure that you have good nutrition if you're going to accidentally get sick. Okay, so now we're going to talk about tips to improve the digestive health with prebiotics, probiotics, and fiber. And this section can really impact anyone regardless of your age. So we're going to cover this section next. So what are prebiotics? So this is a question that people are like, prebiotics, probiotics, what's the difference? So a prebiotic this is an official definition, so I didn't make this one up, a substrate that is selectively utilized by host microorganisms conferring a health benefit. So what are they? They're indigestible fibers used by gut microbes as a preferred source of nutrients to provide health benefits. It's food for the beneficial microbes or the probiotics, which we'll cover. Another way to think about it is it's like compost for your garden. I'm a gardener. Some of you probably out there love to garden. And if our soil's just been there for a long time, it's not going to make good plants. So we need to take that compost and put it in. So that's what our prebiotics function as, is our compost. And some examples are garlic, onions, dried fruit, beans, nuts, chia seeds, flax seeds, fiber supplements. We'll cover those in a minute. I saw so many of these things on our table, and I was like, this is so great. Look at all these prebiotics we have on our table. So next, what are probiotics? So again, this is official definition here. Live microorganisms, which when administered in adequate amounts, confer a health benefit on the host. So basically, these are the live microbes living in your gut. Here's an interesting and fun fact. So fermented foods like yogurt, kefir, could be kimchi or sauerkraut, they often do not have enough microbes to meet the definition of a probiotic, but they're still good for overall gut health. So when someone says, I'm taking a probiotic, I'm eating yogurt every day, I'm like, not quite the same thing. Still good for your gut health. I love fermented foods, but generally doesn't meet the qualification or the standard or the definition of a probiotic. So what are some properties of probiotics? So for those of you that are in the Oaks group, I did a whole presentation just on probiotics in March. This is not that presentation. I only have it in a couple of slides. I literally could spend an hour just talking about probiotics, but I decided just to give you a few slides today. So we're just going to talk about a few things. So what are the things that probiotics can do? So it's important to know, if you're going to take a probiotic, what is it doing for me? It can inhibit or prevent pathogenic bacteria from sticking to the intestinal wall. It can secrete neurotransmitters. So if you've ever heard of serotonin, that's the feel-good chemical. And about 90% of your body's serotonin is made in your digestive system. It can aid in digestion, like breaking down lactose. It can ferment carbohydrates and produce something called short-chain fatty acids. So I was talking about those metabolites earlier. And short-chain fatty acids, I didn't put this on the slide, but I'm just going to tell you right now because it's really cool. So short-chain fatty acids are made by microbes. So let's say you eat some fiber. The fiber feeds the microbes. The microbes produce short-chain fatty acids. This is the cool part. Short-chain fatty acids feed another set of microbes. And those microbes, their job is to keep your gut lining and your large intestine healthy. So what means is if you're not eating enough fiber to feed the microbes, to make short-chain fatty acids, those bugs at the very end of the line, they are hungry. And guess what they do? They will eat the lining of your own digestive system because they don't have anything to eat because you didn't feed them any fiber. So I know it sounds weird, but basically you need to eat the fiber or the bugs will eat you. So that's the shortest way to say that. But when your mom was like, you need to eat your fruits and vegetables, and you rolled your eyes, you're like, yeah, Mom, okay, whatever. She didn't know this. We didn't have the science for that, but as it turns out, it's actually true. So, important. Also, probiotics can alleviate a lot of these digestive symptoms that we're worried about. So pain, bloating, diarrhea, constipation. It can regulate gut motility, so if things are too fast or too slow, it can help to regulate that. It can reduce intestinal inflammation, can modulate your immune responses, and interestingly, it can reduce symptoms of depression. Now, these are all positive things, right? So there has to be some drawbacks. Yep, there are risks and limitations, so these are them. So worsening symptoms of all the things that you were trying to take a probiotic for. So you're taking it for your gas and bloating, and then it can make your gas and bloating worse. That can actually happen. It can actually delay the return of normal gut bugs after antibiotics. So I've been doing this for 30 years, so I remember, and maybe your doctor still does this, you go on an antibiotic for let's say a bladder infection, and then you're like, ooh, I'm supposed to take a probiotic. So you go over and you take your probiotic because you heard you're supposed to do that. That's actually old information. They actually do not recommend that you take a probiotic now when you have antibiotics, with the exception of one, which I'm going to tell you in a couple slides. So see, I'm just dribbling some stuff in, so keep you paying attention. It's going to be in a couple slides from now. So not telling you quite yet. Okay, so yes, there's one probiotic that we do recommend when you're on antibiotics. Other than that, we generally don't recommend them. The industry that makes probiotics, they are making a fortune. Billions and billions of dollars. It is very unregulated. So they can put whatever they want on the bottle, and there's no proof that that's actually what's on the bottle. When they study that, they're studying men, or they're studying, women with a third eye. I mean, you don't even know if that is going to be appropriate for you, right? You need to pay attention to who they're studying. We also don't know, do probiotics actually recolonize the gut? Because there was a thought years ago that if you killed off your bacteria because you took an antibiotic, you could just take a probiotic and it would repopulate it. As it turns out, in about a third of people, we think that might be true, but that also means 2/3 of people, that's not the case. So don't be thinking that I took an antibiotic, I should take this probiotic, and then I'll be fixed. It's not exactly like that. It's a little more complicated. And we know that probiotics, there can be risks for people who are older adults or for people who are immune compromised. Okay, so we've had at least 25 years of research. I look back and I did my very first presentation when I was working in the hospital for a group of doctors and pharmacists on probiotics, and I did it in the year 2000. So I've literally been talking about probiotics for 26 years. And early in those years, we were all about it. We were giving all of our hospital patients probiotics. Interestingly, the last 7 or 8 years, I use a lot fewer probiotics. Isn't that interesting? So we know that even with all of that research, the American Gastroenterological Association, it's called the AGA, recommends against the use of probiotics with only 4 exceptions. And chances are you probably don't fit into one of these 4 categories, but I thought I'd read them to you just in case. So infection in adults and children taking antibiotics, so that is one group. So maybe people with C. diff. That's the second one, C. diff. The third one is prevention of necrotizing enterocolitis in preterm low birth weight infants, and for management of pouchitis, which is a complication of inflammatory bowel disease. So generally speaking, the governing bodies for gastroenterology in the United States do not recommend using probiotics. Now that said, when you talk to doctors, they're using them all the time. Dietitians are using them all the time. So it's not like we don't use them. It's just that we use them less frequently, a little bit more specific about how we choose them. So if you're someone that's yeah, I'm going to do a probiotic, and you know what? It's worth it sometimes. What I recommend is that you want to match the strain with the condition when you're treating. So you can use this US Probiotic Guide or ISAPP Science. You want to verify the quality and the potency with a third-party identifying company. So what they do is they take a probiotic, they buy it off the shelf, and they send it right to the lab. And they will test it to make sure it actually says what it says, or actually contains what it says on the bottle. If you have a sensitive gut, and we'll be talking more about sensitive guts, you're going to choose a probiotic that does not contain one of these ingredients: inulin, chicory root, oligosaccharide, specifically fructose or xylo oligosaccharide, fructose, or sugar alcohols. So all of those things on that list are prebiotics. So if you don't have a sensitive gut, prebiotics, we've talked about how good they are, right? But these prebiotics are not great for people with a sensitive gut. So if you're going out to take a probiotic, you don't want one that's got ingredients that's going to make your stomach feel worse. So that can be important. That's someone like me that can help you with that. So do I have a favorite probiotic? Somebody out here I know has written that on their note card. Do you have a favorite probiotic? The answer is no, because each person in this room has a different microbiome. So what works for this person is not going to work for that person. So I can't say this one brand is going to work for everyone. So it's something that I work individually on, with my patients on, talking about their history. We're talking about what works for them, and we'll figure it out together. But no, there's not one brand that I like for everyone. Okay, so we're almost done with prebiotics. So prebiotic and probiotic recommendations. Always discuss with your care provider, whether that's your primary care, your gastroenterologist, your dietitian, before starting a probiotic supplement. For general gut health, I do recommend incorporating those fermented foods. So when we talked about the yogurt and the kefir, all that stuff, yeah, absolutely incorporate those. Probiotics, not recommended for everyone. If you're immune compromised, use those probiotics with caution and only use the strains that have been proven to have efficacy. Here's that little tidbit that I told you I was going to share earlier. For those on antibiotics, studies show that a probiotic called Saccharomyces boulardii reduces antibiotic-associated diarrhea. And the brand that we tend to use a lot of is called Florastore, and you can usually get that at your local grocery store. Again, it's not my favorite in particular, but that's the one that people are most familiar with. I know of some other brands, but I do like that Saccharomyces boulardii. Part of the reason it works is it's not a bacteria, it's actually a yeast. So instead of fighting those bad bugs with more bugs, this is actually a yeast. We know that dietary fiber is a good source of prebiotics. We're going to cover fiber in just a minute. And taking a prebiotic fiber supplement can promote bowel regularity. Okay, so now we're moving away from prebiotics and probiotics. We're going to talk a little bit about dietary fiber. So what is dietary fiber? So these are carbohydrates. They're found in your food that cannot be digested by the human body, but can be digested by the microbes that are in your intestines. So a lot of people don't realize that fiber is not really supposed to be broken down by your body. It's being broken down by the microbes living inside your body. So for many years, and really a lot of people still talk about soluble fiber and insoluble fiber, but what we found is actually there are more designations when it comes to fiber, and even a lot of people don't know this. So not only is there soluble and insoluble, there's viscous and non-viscous, and fermentable and non-fermentable. So the only thing you really need to know here, you don't need to memorize and get overwhelmed by this, but just know that fiber itself, just like the microbes, is actually kind of complicated. But it's also exciting because the more diverse our diet is, the more plants we have, the more chances we're going to cover all those bases. Like we're going to get all these different kinds of fiber in. So I work with people who have digestive problems. So if you don't have digestive problems, you are welcome to eat whatever plants you want. That is great. We're going to talk about that on another slide. But if you are someone that's like, ooh, my tummy just doesn't like everything out there, these are some tummy-friendly dietary fiber examples. So chia and flax seeds, nuts and seeds, moderate portions of those, oats and oat bran, different grains, beans like chickpeas and lentils, blueberries and raspberries, beets, Brussels sprouts, edamame, and zucchini. But I always say, it's really important that you know your body because there are certain types of fiber or plants that just don't agree with people, like red peppers. They just don't agree with me. I like them, but they don't like me. And that's okay. I just pick something else. So don't ever feel like if there's something on a list somewhere and you can't eat that because your body doesn't like it, that's okay. We'll find something else. No problem. So this has been kind of a new trend like the last few years. You may have heard, like I've been around again a long time, they used to talk about Strive for 5. That was 5 fruits and vegetables every single day. The newest trend has been trying to get 20 to 30 different plants per week. I was wishing that I had added up how many different plants were on the table tonight for the salads because I feel like you're like, maybe 2/3 of the way there just by having tonight's salad. But maybe you just start with evaluating how many plants do I eat in a week and can I get a few more or a couple of different ones. So yeah, it's fruits and vegetables. We forget about, herbs fit into that, nuts and seeds and whole grains. So there's a lot of different ways to get plants into your diet. And sometimes we start with just a little bit. Like if I have somebody that's really sensitive in their tummy, we don't have to have a 5-bean chili. We don't start with that. We might start with a tablespoon of lentils or, like a teaspoon of something over here. So it's okay to start with small amounts if you're worried that your gut is like, we don't know if it's going to like it or not. So moving on to our supplements of our prebiotic fibers. So these are, again, I work with people with digestive issues. So these are the most gut-friendly digestive prebiotic fibers. So we have partially hydrolyzed guar gum. It's also called sun fiber. It's made by one company, and then they sell it to about 10 different companies that all put their own label on it. So if it says sun fiber, it's all the same thing. Then we've got acacia gum, and there's a couple different brands for that. And then psyllium, which is really like Metamucil. People are really familiar with Metamucil. But with psyllium, if you've ever used the powder, you put it in the water, you mix it with the water, and you have like 45 seconds to drink it, or it literally turns into jelly, right? So there's kind of like this time frame, and you're like, clock's starting, go! And you have to like go, and get it down. And if you're like, I hate Metamucil, you know what? There are other choices out there. You don't have to have that one. Now, if you are someone that's on a dietary fiber supplement, and you're like, mine is not on her list, you know what? That's okay. Because if you like it and it agrees with you, sure, just keep using that fiber. Like, that's no problem. I don't have a problem with that. Like, this is more about if you can't use some of these other types of fiber, what are some that might be more friendly for you? Now, remember, I mentioned a few times, fiber can be really helpful for normalizing bowel movements. So if you're someone that's a little too loose, it can help them like solidify a little bit. If you're someone with constipation, it can kind of help soften things. So it kind of really helps with both. Okay, so now we're getting into some practical tips for common digestive symptoms. So if you're someone that has a really normal, happy digestive tract, I am so happy for you. I'm a little jealous, but also so happy for you. So maybe you just like take a little chill break, and that's okay, but maybe you have a friend, a family member, or someone that can benefit from this information. So we're going to talk about a couple of the really common issues that I see really every single day. So the first one is gastroesophageal reflux disease, otherwise known as a GERD or a reflux. So these are just some eating tips that I often recommend. So if this applies to you, take some notes here. So you want to limit your citrus, spicy, acidic foods, chocolate. I know I hate to say that one, chocolate, garlic, and onions. You want to reduce intake of coffee, tea, soda, carbonated, and alcoholic beverages. Just plan to drink a lot of water. That's the best. And then be cautious with tea or like chews or gum that have peppermint. People don't realize that peppermint actually relaxes smooth muscle, and that includes in your esophagus. So if you have reflux, peppermint might actually make it worse. You want to limit fried and high-fat meals and try not to consume so much that your stomach is full. Because what happens when you have reflux and you have a really full tummy is if you bend over or you exercise, it increases what they call intra-abdominal pressure. And guess what? If your tummy's full of stuff and you lean over or whatever, all that is going to go right up in your esophagus, and it's just going to make you feel worse. And then some of my patients say, they don't even have to change their diet that much, but the thing that helps them the most is just to stop eating about 3 hours before they go to bed. So we know that all that food is really digested before they go to sleep. So that's another really good tip. So some lifestyle and positioning. You want to make sure that you exercise about 30 minutes per day. You want to limit the food right before you exercise, again, like I just mentioned, and avoid restrictive clothing. Because if you're wearing really those tight, things that you wear under your clothes to make everything all like this, that is going to make your reflux much, much worse. Positioning, so you can elevate the head of your bed with blocks. If you want to buy one of those cool mattresses that you can elevate the head of the bed, that's really cool, that really works. You can use a wedge pillow. And then sleeping on your left side is actually beneficial because the way the stomach is shaped, if you're sleeping on your right side, the acid can go right up into your esophagus. And if you're sleeping on the left side, the acid can't get uphill to get there. So sleeping on your left side is really beneficial. So, if you have GERD or reflux, you have probably been on Prilosec or Prevacid or one of those proton pump inhibitors. You're familiar with that. Then the next stage down from that is our Pepcid, our famotidine, Tagamet, that category. The one below that is our Rolaids and our Tums. So if you've had reflux, you've probably tried all those things, but maybe you haven't tried one of my favorite things. It's sodium alginate. They're not paying me to say this. I promise I don't work for these companies. So the sodium alginate is a type of seaweed. You take it can be in pill, and I have some samples for you, or it can be in liquid. You take it down, it forms a raft on top of whatever's in your stomach, and then whatever's in your stomach is going up and down, and you don't have any burning. It doesn't hurt. I had reflux the other day, and I took one of these. I kid you not, in 10 minutes, my stomach felt better. You can also take it along with other medications. So if you're on medications from your doctor, you can also take this for breakthrough pain, and it's safe for all ages and no known side effects. Ta-da! I know, so good. So I brought some samples, but my favorite brands are Reflux Gourmet, Reflux Raft, and Reflux Tur. So that's a little bit about reflux. So moving on to bloating and gas, one of my other fun things I love to talk about. So what are the causes? So drinking lots of carbonated beverages, like Spindrift and LaCroix is really popular, but guess what? All that carbonation is making more bubbles in your body. Some people swallow a lot of air when they talk. I didn't add this to the list, but a lot of people are on a CPAP or a BiPAP at night, and that CPAP can also make gas bubbles. Lactose intolerance, irritable bowel syndrome. And then the treatments involve, and we'll talk about the treatments a little bit more, but diet changes, mainly over-the-counter medications. There's not a lot of pharmaceuticals that help with bloating and gas. There's a few, but not very many. There's some gut-brain treatments, so we haven't talked a lot about that, but we'll be talking a little bit more about diaphragmatic breathing in just a minute. So some simple eating tips if you're someone that suffers from bloating and gas. We talked about carbonation, so take that out. One thing to put in is green kiwi. So they've done some research, and eating one green kiwi twice a day, and it can be golden, I've checked on that, so green or golden kiwi. One kiwi twice a day was proven to help gas and bloating and constipation. And an interesting part in this study, it was versus prunes and Metamucil, which are two of the standards that they use for constipation. And at the end of the study, the people eating the kiwi had not only the least amount of bloating and constipation, but they had the best quality of life, and they were the happiest at the study outcome. And I was like, cool, more kiwi. Again, I don't work for the kiwi growers or anything. Okay, so we're gonna choose foods with less processing and fewer ingredients, so closest to the original state. So then we're gonna reduce our intake of lactose, eliminate those sugar alcohols. So that's like sorbitol or xylitol. It's found in sugar-free gum, candy, cough drops, supplements like chewable vitamin C. I mentioned they have it in probiotics sometimes, and cough syrup. So some of this stuff you don't use very often, but all of a sudden, you got a cough, and so you pull out your bag of cough drops, and like almost the first thing in it is sorbitol. So be really careful with that. Okay, some more over-the-counter treatments. So gentle circular tummy massage, really helpful. Diaphragmatic breathing. So if you Google diaphragmatic breathing in University of Michigan, you'll come up on a YouTube. And it's basically, we understand that we've been talking about a while ago, but the vagus nerve and how the vagus nerve can be triggered. And that vagus nerve can, with diaphragmatic breathing, it kind of turns on your vagus nerve so that you can make sure that your gut and your brain can go from that fight or flight to rest and digest. So that kind of has double benefits. And we have some of our over-the-counter things that you can use. I did bring peppermint oil, the IV Guard. I didn't say this earlier, but doctors used to get drug samples, and dietitians, we get supplement samples, and I have an all-virtual practice, so I get all these samples. I'm like, what am I gonna do with these? So you guys get to take home some samples today, because I got boxes, and I was like, cool, I'm just gonna bring them and give them all to you. And again, there's a few pharmaceuticals, but the doctor would be a good person to talk to about that. Now, I know, if you have never seen this before, this is the Bristol Stool Scale. And I told Chandra before we started tonight, I was like, this is something you never thought you would see in the church sanctuary. Up on the screen was poop listed out for your enjoyment. Did you know there's a poop scale? So when you go to your doctor and your doctor says, well, like, or you say, I'm not pooping normally, and like, what does that mean? You're like, I'm having a lot of type 1s or type 2, Bristol type 2. And they're like, oh, okay. Like, they know what that means. Or if you're like, I'm having a lot of diarrhea. And they're like, well, what is it? And you're like, it's like type 7. It's like colonoscopy prep. They're like, oh, I know what that means, right? So this is one way that you can communicate with your care provider, is by basically analyzing your own poop and then taking that information and telling them about it. Okay, so now we're going to talk about, of course, I'm the diarrhea dietitian. I have to talk about diarrhea. It's one of my favorite things. And irritable bowel syndrome with diarrhea, otherwise known as IBSD. What are our common causes? Medication side effects, lactose intolerance, some medical conditions that are listed there, lots of diet changes that can be made, medications that are prescription over the counter. And I'm always like, yeah, we can like give you Imodium to solve your diarrhea problem, but what's causing it? So I'm always looking at what's the underlying cause. Can we fix that problem and then we don't even have to take Imodium anymore? That's my goal. So these are some simple eating tips. So choose foods, again, with less processing, fewer ingredients. Reduce foods that are spicy, greasy, high fat, high in lactose. Caffeine speeds up GI motility. So what that means is if you're someone that's drinking a lot of coffee or drinking energy drinks, then that is going to make everything in your intestines move through faster. So it can make your diarrhea worse. Starchy carbs like potatoes, pasta, and rice will help slow things down a little bit. And then we talked about those sugar alcohols earlier, so I'll just move on from there. So I call that like simple low-hanging fruit. So we start with the simple things. And if you're like, okay, I've done all the simple things, what are the more advanced things? So we have something called the low FODMAP diet. So this is a diet that's been studied for over 20 years for people with irritable bowel syndrome, both with diarrhea and with constipation. It also helps with bloating and gas. It's an acronym, so it just stands for fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. It's a mouthful, but this is why I recommend if you're gonna do a low FODMAP diet that you meet with a dietitian that's been trained to teach it, because it's not really something that you can do easily online. A lot of gastroenterologists will be like, you need a low FODMAP diet, and they give you, I call it the one pager. It's like eat this and don't eat that, and there's way more nuance to it than that. So if you are going to pursue this, I recommend doing it with someone that can do it. I have free handouts available on my website, so you can look on there, diarrheadietitian.com. The good news is with low FODMAP, it doesn't have to be perfect for it to work. And for some people, they're like, that diet's really hard, I don't want to do that. We have FODMAP enzymes now that we can use. There's one I love called FODzyme. I have like 5 samples, so you can have samples if that's something interesting to you. If you're going to follow low FODMAP, do the low FODMAP app, and then there's meal delivery service. Okay, we're almost done. So diarrhea treatments, most of these are familiar to you. You've seen them in your grocery store. Also, our fiber supplements like psyllium and sunfiber can be helpful for diarrhea as well. Okay, constipation. I know, you knew we were gonna get here. So common causes, genetics, inadequate fluid intake, immobility, inadequate exercise, a low fiber diet, medication side effects. pelvic floor disorders. So let me just pause really quick and tell you a little bit about that. So pelvic floor disorders are, this is kind of the analogy that they've used for me, is it has to do with how your body empties like your poop out of your body. So when you are eating this beautiful, wonderful diet, but the mechanics aren't working properly, it can be like if you have a toothpaste tube and you try to squeeze the tube, but the cap is on and nothing comes out. That's like pelvic floor disorder. So if that's something that's, that sounds like you're like, I'm eating this great diet with lots of fiber and nothing's coming out. It may be that you actually need physical therapy for that pelvic floor disorder. And then we have other medical conditions associated with constipation. Interestingly, constipation affects about 15% of the population, and people over 65, it affects 26% of women. So if you are over 65, chances are there's like at least 26% of people that are suffering from this. And of course, only 16% of men. Wouldn't you know it? So some first steps. Make sure you're drinking enough fluid. We're going to increase our fiber from food. If you add a fiber supplement, I didn't talk about this earlier, start low, go slow. That is always a recommendation. So if it says, like Metamucil, it's like 2 tablespoons, please don't start with 2 tablespoons. Start with a half a teaspoon or 1 teaspoon and do that for 3 or 4 days until your body kind of regulates to that, and then increase the dose by a little bit. Don't go crazy because you'll be like, I tried Metamucil and it was a disaster, it was terrible. Like, don't do that to yourself. Use the toilet 30 minutes after meals. Toilet positioning, so there's something called a squatty potty. It's a little stool that fits around and elevates your feet. It changes the position of how your body empties, from your rectum, and it can really impact people's ability to empty their poop better. So, squatty potty, love it. Again, I don't work for them. Move your body daily, and then I just talked about the physical therapy for pelvic floor disorders. Simple eating tips. We talked about the kiwi, super helpful, choosing foods with less processing and fewer ingredients. And then some of the things that we eat that cause more constipation include rice, potatoes, pasta, bread, peanut butter, dairy products, fried foods. Not all of those for everybody, but people will find that certain foods tend to impact them more. And, let's face it, like comfort foods, like potatoes and rice and pasta, those things are delicious. But if we're not eating as many like fresh fruits and vegetables, we're getting more starches, it's going to contribute to that constipation. So over-the-counter treatment, so we've got our fiber supplements. We talked about psyllium ad nauseum, but one of the things we haven't talked about is one of my favorite treatments for constipation is magnesium. So not all magnesiums are created alike, so magnesium citrate or magnesium oxide are the ones you want to take if you have constipation. You want to take it at bedtime because it makes you sleepy. You don't want to take it first thing in the morning. It comes in tablets, it comes in powder. I usually have people start with about 200 to 300 milligrams, and kind of like the fiber, we're going to take that for a few days and we're going to increase it until we get to just the right dose. Now, something that we recommend that we use less often is Miralax, Senna, Dulcolax. I don't have a problem using those, but our bowels can get lazy if you're using these all the time. It forgets how to have a bowel movement. So if your doctor prescribes it or recommends it, absolutely take it like your doctor recommends. But I like to start with magnesium first, and I like to use these others as kind of rescue meds. So if we can't find something that works for us, then we take those when we need them. Okay. This is a busy slide. I'm going to make it really quick, but a couple of our community river members have contacted me about this in the last week, and I was like, I'm going to make a slide about it. So it's called post-infectious IBS. So it occurs in about 1 in 10 people after an acute bacterial, viral, or protozoal infection. So the cyclospora problem that we've had nationally this summer, it happens in about 1 in 10 people, and within about a year, there's about a 4 times higher risk of IBS for people who have had that. Guess what? Guess who's at higher risk? Women, yeah, and younger women, of course. People with pre-existing anxiety or depression. There is no FDA-approved medication for the treatment of post-infectious IBS. There's a few things they're experimenting with, but we as dietitians might talk about some things like the low FODMAP diet that I mentioned for IBSD. There's something called L-glutamine that's been helpful to help with what we call leaky gut or intestinal permeability, and sometimes probiotics. And now on the right-hand side, that really messy part is the algorithm that doctors use to decide how they're going to treat someone with that condition. Okay, we just have a couple more slides. I'm going to be done, and we're going to be ready for questions. So always discuss with your doctor if you have new symptoms, weight loss, bowel movements that wake you up in the night, blood in your stool, fever, intense fatigue. If you have any of these, make sure you discuss them with your care team. These are some podcasts that I like to listen to. So if you're someone that likes podcasts, these are both made by a couple of my friends. So the Gut Health Podcast is a really good one, and so is the IBS Nutrition Podcast. It's all evidence-based, and they interview researchers that like to talk about health and nutrition and the gut microbiome. So those are some really good ones that I like. So this is our last summary slide. What can you do? Okay, so you can manage stress. So we're trying to get to that rest and digest. You got to get your colonoscopy. If you're over age 45, please, please, please get your colonoscopy. Talk with your doctor. The prep isn't awesome. I've done it 4 times, but it's totally doable. And colon cancer is a really slow-growing cancer. So if you can find these polyps early and they can take care of it early, you won't get colon cancer. Please get your colonoscopy. You can meet with a dietitian like myself or someone else. And as we've been talking about, you can definitely eat more plants. And with that, I am done, and it's time for our Q&A. So if you have questions, bring them on. Did people ask lots of questions?
We do have some questions.
Okay.
Niki, that's amazing. Thank you. I just went to master's class in digestive health. We have a couple questions. How do I know if a craving is being sent up my nervous system by good bugs or bad bugs?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We don't really know. But let's be honest, is a truly good gut bug going to ask us to eat chocolate? Maybe. But probably not.
Yes.
If that gut bug is like, you really need to get some fiber today, and you know what sounds good? Some chia seeds, then yeah, that's probably a good gut bug. That's probably how I would say it.
Okay, thank you.
I have another question here that says, why are we calling them bugs?
Yeah. Well, sometimes I call them bugs, sometimes I call them microbes, but they're all, like we looked at, there's like 6 different kinds of microbes. And so sometimes it's easier to think about them as bugs, but you can't just call them bacteria because they're not all just bacteria. There's a bunch of other things too. So bugs is the easiest word, but it's not perfect. So microbes is probably a little more scientific.
Okay, let's see. When you eat bananas, is it helping constipation or making it worse?
Ooh, good question. So part of the old brat diet, bananas, rice, applesauce, and toast diet, for diarrhea, bananas were included in that. So bananas can be a little bit constipating. Interestingly, for people with diarrhea, the green bananas are actually a little bit better for them than the yellow spotted bananas. So green bananas are good for diarrhea. But I say for constipation, bananas probably are going to make it a little bit worse. Not hugely, but a little bit.
We have several questions, probably from mamas, about their kids and kiddos specifically with autism or ADHD. Mm-hmm. Are there some probiotics that you recommend? Do you recommend them? Do you don't? That sort of thing.
That would probably be a one-on-one decision that I would make. We know that I work with a lot of, I don't work with a lot of kids, some teens, but I work with a lot of adults with autism spectrum disorder. There is a huge connection between the gut microbiome and autism. So we know that from science. And so, yes, I would be happy to work with people on probiotics. Is there one brand of probiotic that's good for people with autism? No, but there would be something that I would work on with them. Yeah, it's a good question.
What is the impact of having to take omeprazole every day rather than a 14-day dose as prescribed by a doctor?
Mm-hmm. So if your doctor recommends it, you should take it. But it makes me sad when doctors put someone on omeprazole and then they just are on it for 15 or 20 years, because there are downstream impacts on being on a proton pump inhibitor or acid suppression like that. If you need it, you need it. So people that have Barrett's esophagus, people that have eosinophilic esophagitis, they have to be on those drugs. So I'm not going to badmouth those drugs, so sometimes they're needed. But if I can get someone to wean off of those really potent drugs onto the next level down, which is like those Pepcid type medications, I would love to do that. It takes about 6 months. It takes a long time to wean someone down. So if your doctor says you have to take it no matter what, take it. But if you're working with me and they're like, well, my doctor started it 15 years ago and I've just been taking it ever since, let's work together. Let's see if we can work it down and get onto something that's a little bit lighter. Because then you could use that sodium alginate I was talking about, you could use that for any kind of breakthrough and still be getting acid suppression without getting the acid blocking. Yeah.
This is probably our last question, and I love it. How often should a person poop per day?
Oh, I almost said that. I'm so glad someone asked that question. So everyone thinks that one poop every morning is the only way to go. And you know, that's dreamy, but that's not the reality for a lot of people. So the reality is anywhere between one poop and probably 3 or 4 poops a day is normal. But within a week's period, I really want to get people pooping at least 4 or 5 times a week. So if you're someone that just really doesn't have the urge and you only have to go like once every 3 or 4 days, like I want to get things moving because there's a reason our body needs to get rid of that stuff. Like it shouldn't be sitting inside you. Like you're just absorbing things that you don't need to be absorbing at that point. So yeah, I would say poop 1 to 3 times a day is normal, but definitely more often like 4, 5, 6, 7 times a week would be what I would like to shoot for, ideally, right? These are all like ideal conditions.
Okay, tell us about the samples that you brought that women can take home.
Yeah, so I brought some samples. Again, they just sent them to me and I'm like, okay, I'll just give these away. So one of them I brought is called IB Guard. So it's this peppermint oil. So it's really good. It's not really good if you have the reflux, when we talked about that, but if you have gas, bloating, diarrhea, constipation, IB Guard is really good. It's concentrated peppermint oil. That's all it is. So it's kind of like, I heard someone say this week, it's kind of like a hug for your intestines. I was like, oh, yeah, I kind of like it. It's kind of like, soothing. So IB Guard, and then it has another one next to it, and that one is made by the same company. It's more for like indigestion. It's called FD Guard. Then I have 2 for GERD, okay? So the one that's Refluxter, which is the same sodium alginate as this other brand that's called Reflux Gourmet. So I like those both. One's a capsule and one's kind of more like a honey consistency. I like both of those. I have about 5 samples of like the FODzyme, which is the FODMAP enzyme. So if you want like a couple samples of those. And then there's a couple like protein powders in there that somebody can have. Oh, and there's a couple of lactase enzymes. So if you're someone that's lactose intolerant, you want to try a different brand of lactate. It's kind of like Lactaid. It's a really potent lactate. It's like twice as potent as regular Lactaid. You can take some of those. So yeah, and I'll stay up and ask like, I can answer some individual questions if you have them, but like if you have lots and lots of questions, I'll probably be like, hey, you should make an appointment. Because, you know, like the thing with digestive nutrition is that it's really specific. So I was giving really general information today, but each person in this room has a different digestive system that's going to require a different set of, you know, maybe complicated or maybe simple solutions. So that's what I like to work with people on, because your doctor doesn't have time for that, but your dietitian does, because all my appointments are like an hour, so it's good.
That's awesome. Can we thank Niki?
Thank you.
So much. That was wonderful. So maybe Niki, you can hang out up here. I want to, on the theme of thank yous, I just want us to thank some women who've been so helpful for this evening. First of all, if you were on the kitchen team cutting and chopping vegetables, would you just stand so we can thank you so much for our dinner? Don't be shy. Don't be shy. We want to thank you. And then I want to thank Jacob at our soundboard and Margot back there who are with us tonight. We have recorded this presentation, so there was a lot there for you to absorb, but you can go back and watch it on our Women's Ministry YouTube channel. It will be posted probably in about 24 hours. And right now. It'll be posted right now. How about, you can go home and watch it again. Thank you, Jacob. That's awesome.
If you want a copy of my slides, I mean, like it's really nerdy, but some people are like, there was a lot of stuff I didn't get to take notes on. You can also email me. My email's on that last slide, and I can email you like a PDF copy if that's interesting.
Okay, that's awesome. I want to also thank they can't hear me, but we have Taylor and her husband Elijah, who's our worship leader, and some volunteers downstairs watching your kids. So would you just say thank you to them for watching our kids tonight? Also, thank you to the decor team. If you were on the decor team, did flowers or set, would you please stand? And a special thank you to Jan Goodman and Teresa Johnson. Come on, stand. Woo! Yeah. To making, just thank you for making the space so beautiful. I'm so grateful to you. Also, we had an amazing team who came and tore down the sanctuary and set this up. And that not only, if you were on the tear down team, setup team, would you stand? I don't know. if anybody is here who's on that team, but also our men's ministry came and helped, our safety team came and helped. It takes a village to be a community of women, so we're so grateful to those teams as well. I want to invite you to come on Sundays and join us for worship, also at 9, 11, or 5 p.m. And then, as in the spirit of many hands make light work, I want to just encourage you to, if you would just help us, we have to turn, well, we're not going to do furniture tonight, don't worry about that, but just you could help us with your tables. And so if you would just make sure that your garbage gets into one of the garbage cans that are all around the room would be great. If you could also, don't take the flowers out of the baskets or anything, but if you're able to just maybe fold up the red tablecloths, Jan? The red? Okay, don't do anything with the tablecloths, but just if you wouldn't mind just clearing your tables, you can take the flowers and put them on the long tables over there, and just make sure all the papers are in the garbage and everything's clean. That would go miles to helping us turn this back over to a sanctuary for Sunday. So thank you so much. Thank you for coming. So grateful to see you, and thank you, Niki, again for a wonderful presentation.